Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. About 24 years ago, I went to a lecture at the Jewish Theological Seminary where I was trained to be a rabbi and where I worked at the time after I was ordained as a rabbi. The lecture was given by one of my rabbinic heroes, Rabbi David-Wolpe. And the purpose of the lecture, the title of the lecture, was about changing the title and the understanding of conservative Judaism. And David said something to the effect of that he was sitting on an airplane with somebody, and someone asked him what he does for a living, and that's already a hard enough question when you have to answer, you're a rabbi. He says, I'm a rabbi. He says, oh, well, what kind of Judaism do you practice? He says, well, I'm a conservative rabbi. And the person appreciated his response, but had no idea what that meant. Because a conservative rabbi means one thing in Judaism, means a totally different thing when talking about politics. Conservative and conservative aren't the same things. So he says, what does that mean? Does that mean that you're a right-wing rabbi? And he said, oh, no, not at all. And he starts to explain it to him, and he realizes that as he's explaining it to him, the flight is getting ready to land. And that it took him so long to explain to someone who really doesn't know the details and nuances of Judaism what conservative Judaism is. So Rabbi Wolpe gave this very compelling lecture that we should change the title of conservative Judaism to something else. I happened to, at the time, disagree with his suggestion. He wanted to call it covenantal Judaism. I thought that was like jumping from the frying pan into the fire. No one knows what covenantal means, just like they wouldn't know what conservative means. But I did agree with his assessment that we needed something simpler, something easier. And his major frustration, Rabbi Wolpe's, was that we need a definition of Judaism for our movement that can fit on a bumper sticker. And instead, every definition of conservative Judaism needs a semicolon. You can't explain it in an elevator, which is where the word elevator pitch comes from. How can you explain this in 10 seconds, 20 seconds to somebody? And it's just really challenging. They did come up with some phrases to try and help. Tradition and change was what the conservative leadership had come up with to explain what our movement is, but even that is complicated, and most people would say, huh? Tradition and change, that's what it is to be a conservative synagogue? And what most people say about being a conservative synagogue is, well, we're not Reform and we're not Orthodox. And for years of my life, I championed this lecture by David-Wolpe because I thought that's what we need. We need a bumper sticker. We need something that just explains who we are and what we are to people faster. And then I started thinking, boy, we need that not only for conservative Judaism, we really need that for our religion as a whole. Because when people ask, what is Judaism? I wish I could just say 3 words, a sentence that everyone would understand. That's who we are. But I tell you, if I were to say Judaism is about tikkun olam, making the world better, I see some shaking their head and others would say, well, that's nice, but that's not what Judaism is to me. If I would say Judaism is about halakha and Jewish law and following the law, others would say, the law doesn't mean so much to me, but the Spirit does. And it's hard to define what we are, even beyond the streams of our identity, to the masses. And especially at this heightened time, it becomes even more difficult. I was listening to a podcast this week, and Sarah Hurwitz, who just wrote her 2nd book on Judaism, was on, and she gave a fantastic analogy that really resonated with me. She said, and I can appreciate this, and Zoe, your mitzvah project fits right into this. She said, I go to the eye doctor, and by the way, 10 years ago, I never wore glasses. 5 years ago, I put on glasses just to read. Today, I cannot see my watch without my glasses. I'm loving the 50s. They're great. So the eye doctor is an important stop for me every year, and I seem to get an increased prescription every year. And when I go to the eye doctor, like many of you, they put you in this machine, and my eye doctor, they show me a picture of a red farmhouse. Anyone else have that in theirs? And then they ask me that question. Which one looks clearer, 1 or 2? 1 or 2? 1 or 2? And what I struggle with is that I really want, number 1, to be so blurry, you can't see anything. Like it's just almost pitch black. And number 2, it's crystal clear. But that's never what they give me. It's always this very, very slight difference where they go back and forth, and you have to try and decipher which one is better, and it's not so clear-cut. It's nuanced. It's not simple, oh, I can see 2 perfectly, but 1, I can't make it out at all. For me, it's about that little touch of clarity, where maybe in number 1 I can see the house clearer, but in number 2 I can see the whole picture clearer. And that is a sense of nuance that I think is happening in spades in our world. Today, Jake Becker read from the Torah, and he read beautifully. He read a very long passage called the Tochacha, which is translated loosely in our tradition as the rebuke. Don't do this, because if you do, you will be punished. And there's a whole list of things you can't do. And they range from relationships we're not allowed to have, to behaviors we're not allowed to follow, to people we're not allowed to engage with, foods we're not allowed to eat, you name it. And if you do these things, you will be punished. And I think the Tochacha does a grave disservice to the Jewish people, to all of us, by taking it at face value. Because you know, and I know, that there are things in that Tochacha, things that are specifically written in the Torah, and things that are implied in the Torah, that you and I both break. And we're not punished for it. We know that good things happen to bad people. We know that the Tochacha isn't authentic. It isn't true. And what I wish the Tochacha would do is I wish it would give us a sense of nuance. I wish the Tochacha would say, you really shouldn't behave this way, and if you do, I don't know what's going to happen to you. Something terrible might happen right away, or nothing might happen right away. Or maybe good deeds will outpower it, but you shouldn't do it because it's just not the right thing to do. But the Torah doesn't do that. The Torah tells us specifically, you will be punished. You will be cursed. And our frustration is, we know it's not true. We might be cursed. We might be punished. But we don't know if we will, and we don't know where and when and how it happens, and we don't know if what's happening is indeed correlating to the punishment of the indeed act that we have transgressed. After 24 years of praying on this topic, of a simpler understanding of Judaism, of a bumper sticker that I wish I could explain to others, I'm at a different stage in my life. And perhaps it's a result of maturity. Perhaps it's a result of the number that precedes my age. Perhaps it's a result of the environment that I live in today and that you live in too. But I don't have a problem today with semicolons. I don't have a problem today with longer explanations that take us to the descending time of the plane. And in fact, I think that is what our world needs today more than ever. We need more nuance, more explanation, more detail, and less bumper stickers. We need to unpack more, to roll up our sleeves more, and to get out of 140 characters to explain every innermost feeling and emotion. This week, a terrible thing happened. Charlie Kirk, a young conservative leader, was murdered in broad daylight, in a crowd full of people. And most likely he was murdered for his high profile and for things that he said that were in disagreement with the person who pulled the trigger. I don't know what level of disagreement they were, whether the person who pulled the trigger thought he was too relaxed, too extreme, whether the person had mental challenge. I have no idea. None of us know just yet what those motives were. But here's where that semicolon comes in for me. I had major problems with Charlie Kirk. It's not that I just disagreed with many of the things he said. No. I disagreed with things that Mitt Romney said. I disagreed with things that Barack Obama said. I disagreed with things John McCain said. I found some of the things that Charlie Kirk said to be despicable. Just like I find some of the things that Zoran Mamdani says, or that Tucker Carlson says, or that Peter Beinart say as despicable. Not just disagreeable, despicable. But at the same time, I'm shaped by the Torah, and I'm shaped by this country of America. And I believe a Torah value that was similar to the value that Voltaire taught, which is, I disagree with every syllable of what you're saying, but I'll fight to my dying day for your right to say it. I believe in that ethic. So long as you're not foisting violence and danger on me, I believe in your right to say it, even if I find it despicable, even if I disagree with it. And to complicate it more, to add a dash, another semicolon, a parenthesis, when it came to advocacy for the state of Israel, Charlie Kirk was a champion, and he was wildly knowledgeable. He knew more about the history of the state of Israel and facts and details related to the current war than most Jews that I know. And he wasn't afraid to share it. It reminded me of a teaching by one of my dear colleagues and friends, Rabbi Jeremy Barris, who's a rabbi in Kendall, Florida. Jeremy said, I go to this restaurant, I keep kosher, and everything on the menu is not kosher. I can't eat any of it, except for their flounder almondine. The flounder almondine I can eat, and it's one of my favorite dishes anywhere in Florida. So I go to this restaurant, and I love the flounder almondine. But everything else on the menu, I don't look at it. I don't want to know from it. I think it's gross. I'm never ordering it. But I go there just for the flounder. And Rabbi Barris uses that as an analogy for people like Charlie Kirk, where he can dial into who they are as Zionists, who they are as Israel advocates, and ignore the other parts. Sometimes I wish I had that discipline. I don't. It's hard for me. I want someone who's just in lockstep with me, who agrees with everything I believe when it comes to Israel, when it comes to America, when it comes to the world, and when they don't, boy, I have a hard time with that semicolon. I have a hard time with that dance. And to be honest with you, it makes me feel very, very lonely. What do we do when someone who says things that we radically disagree with, whether it's Charlie Kirk or whether it's Zoran Mamdani, whether it's Tucker Carlson or whether it's Peter Beinart? What do we do when something bad befalls them? Is there a bumper sticker response? Because what I've seen in the world of social media has been abhorrent to me. It has been as painful to read the responses of people who I consider to be either colleagues or friends or in my social orbit as it is to have seen the death of this young father expressing his First Amendment right and challenging people in voice on a college campus, the epitome of where free expression should live and breathe and grow. They've equally been abhorrent to me and in no way turns down the thermostat. So what do we do with such a thing? How do we handle such a thing? And why on earth should anyone put us in a corner and say, is it good or is it bad? It's complicated. I want to say unequivocally, so that the world will never question where I am, there is no complicated fact in saying this man who is a husband and a father and an activist should be alive. That this man should not be murdered, and that people who express views that we find disagreeable or even despicable or abhorrent should be entitled to express those views so long as they're not creating violence or harming others' lives. That's where we should be. That part isn't complicated. Whether some feel a sense of relief that they no longer have a microphone, or others feel a sense of despair for how this could come in another direction, or what this represents, this is where we must push back on those that ask good or bad and explain with semicolons and nuances and not bumper stickers and elevator pitches. In the same podcast that Sarah Horowitz talked about that eye doctor visit in 1 or 2, and how it isn't so clear-cut all the time, she did some research in her newest book, and she explained that the majority of Jewish people think that core to their identity, 74% of the Jewish identity, is about remembering the Holocaust. 50% is about knowing our Jewish state. 45%, I believe she said, was about connecting with Jewish holidays and identities. And that was it. Those were the main parts. 30% said being humorous is core to Jewish identity, having a good humor. My answer to that is no. Being Jewish, the most important ingredient you need to have for being a Jew is to be able to carry semicolons and to plop them in where and when necessary to explain who we are, what we are, why we are, and where we are. We are a people. We are a nation. We are a religion. We are a value system. We have a history. We have a tradition. And we have a future. That's complicated. I don't know a bumper sticker or a fender in the world that can fit all of that in. But it's high time for us to roll up our sleeves and start to deal with the complicated, to start to offer nuance, to start to say, I find your views despicable, but I find your humanity commendable. I find your passion contagious, even though I disagree with what you're so passionate about. And while you and I might differ on 25 of 30 different things, and we might differ radically, I still love you for being created in God's image. And I still can find redemptive qualities in your life, and I hope you can find them in mine. And I hope we can celebrate that. Because if we don't, then as creation started all over again, we're headed for a giant flood that's going to wipe out all of who we are and what we're about so God can reset our moral compasses. My advice to all of us in the wake of this very difficult week, not just because of the death of Charlie Kirk, but because of so many other factors that led into it, is that when something is simple in life, we should explain it and run simply. And when something is complicated in life, we need to stop running away, and we need to stop boiling it down, and we need to embrace the nuance, the complicated, and to offer the semicolons where and when we can, because our world needs it, and we need to be dialed into it so that we can have more chambers that are open in the heart that we offer. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.